Welcome back. Now, to many observers, the current crisis in Zimbabwe's economy appears to be deepening. Banks are chronically short of cash. The government has delayed paying its own workers, and some basic imports have been banned. Protests, which previously have been rare under President Robert Mugabe's rule, have started increasing. How bad are things there? Let's talk to an economist and the head of research, #ThisFlag movement, Lovemore Fiane. Good afternoon, Lovemore.
Good afternoon to you and to your viewers.
Thank you. By the way, Lovemore is a Zimbabwe, but presently he's in South Africa. Well, how bad is the economic situation in Zimbabwe?
I think, just to sum it up, speaking to various commentators in the country over the last few days when I was there, what they would typically tell you is that each day they think they've hit the bottom of the wave or the trough of the wave. And then the next day comes up and it's a lot worse than the one before. So the situation is pretty dire. Zimbabwe has basically been reduced to an economy of vendors and consumers. There's hardly any manufacturing sector to speak of. I think, if anything, it's in the region of about 34% capacity utilization at the moment. The state of liquidity within the economy is very dire. You typically see long queues outside the commercial banks. It is really, really, really bad.
Now, the government of Mugabe has tried to come up with some kind of reforms. How optimistic are Zimbabweans about these reforms?
Well, the government of Mr. Mugabe has been in power for 36 years. And in those 36 years, I will tell you that as long as they've been running the government on their own, we have never experienced 3 consecutive years of economic growth. If anything, there's been nothing but suffering under ZANU-PF. Even if you look at the numbers themselves, I think the worst case scenario was in 2008 when the economy contracted by as much as almost 10%. So it was only when the government of national unity was put in place in 2009 that we started experiencing some growth, and the economy reached, I think, the levels of about $14 billion US dollars GDP, only just barely. But certainly the precedent that we've seen over 36 data points is that the ZANU-PF government is incapable of implementing any policy that's likely to yield positive results for the economy.
Now, looking at the banking industry there generally, we talked about the cash crunch, the cash situation there. How bad is it with them? How much impact has that had on the banking system there?
Well, there's a little bit of good, but mostly bad. The positive side is that supposedly by accident, Zimbabwe could become one of the world's first cashless economies. But the negative side of it is that it still very much is a cash economy, and there is hardly any cash in the system. The banks simply cannot cope with the level of demand for physical cash. Even when people have money in their bank accounts, they cannot get access to it. I think some banks limit it to as little as $50 US a day. And typically, if you're running expenses of $300-400 a month, what it means is that you must actually take 4 days off in the month, or maybe as many as 8. Where the institution only grants you $50 a day in order for you to be able to access that money and settle your obligations. The situation is pretty bad. It really, really is very dire.
Now, the government had talked about introducing what they call bond notes as a cash substitute. They are to be pegged to the US dollar and would have no value outside Zimbabwe. Could that be a possible solution to the problem?
By and large, no. And the simple reason is that our understanding, speaking to some of the people inside the system, is that when the idea was mooted, it was meant to be utilized as an incentive scheme for exporters and would only circulate between the exporters and the commercial banks as well as the Reserve Bank. But what has happened is that this so-called bond note will now be in open circulation. In other words, ordinary consumers would now have access to it. retailers would now have stock of this so-called bond note, which they can't use to restock on inventory that is imported from outside the country, because it only trades inside the country. So Zimbabwe, in essence, is actually printing its own US dollar, as it were, a phantom US dollar, if you like.
Now, do you still see Zimbabwe as an investment destination?
I think if there is a change of direction and a change of regime, yes, Zimbabwe could be a very attractive investment destination. It's got an impressive array of resources, very diversified naturally. It's got impressive human resources, people that are highly skilled and highly educated in all kinds of industries that you could think of. I think some of the people in Zimbabwe, you could actually take them and go and employ them even in places like Silicon Valley. That's how skilled Zimbabweans are generally. But as things stand, given the government's own stance, as well as the indigenization legislation that they've put in place and are busy punting, it makes it very unattractive.
All right, thank you very much for your time. Love More. Well, Love More is a Zimbabwean living in Johannesburg, South Africa, and he's an economist there. Now let's look at the FMDQ debt intraday for today, and that's crossing over to our own market here in Nigeria. Sheun Amir, fixed income dealer with Citibank, joins me now. Good afternoon, Sheun.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Very well, thank you. So tell me, what is the yield like today?
Well, today we've traded just about flat on bonds, and on T-bills we see that the yields are inched up slightly on T-bills. So bonds, the yields are like just about where they were yesterday, but T-bills the yields have gone up just a little bit, just slightly. Yeah.
Now, in terms of liquidity, what's the current state of the market?
Well, the market is relatively liquid. However, the CBN has been doing more auctions, and they just did another one today. So while the market is liquid, the CBN seems also resolved to mop up with the use of more auctions. And
what is the outlook for the rest of the week? Of course, the month is coming to an end. That's tomorrow. What's your outlook?
Well, the market will just be barely liquid. That's what I think will happen in the market. I don't think it will be very tight, but I don't think we'll have that glut of liquidity either. So we'll just be barely liquid, and the market will just barely liquid.
All right, thank you very much for your time, Sheun. And then we move on now to South Africa, where the rand has weakened against the US dollar in early trade today, weighed down by a firm greenback and continued concerns that the finance minister could be facing imminent arrest. Meanwhile, the central bank says it will not respond to short-term volatility triggered by news of possible charges against Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. The police had summoned Finance Minister to answer questions over a surveillance unit set up in the Revenue Service when he was in charge. And Egypt's parliament has approved the long-awaited law introducing a value-added tax of 13%, which will rise to 14% in the next fiscal year. The parliament have been debating the law for weeks, with several proposals of 15% and wanting to lower it to 12% for fear it would stoke inflation. The 13% rate was agreed after the finance minister proposed it as a compromise in a Sunday parliamentary session. The VAT law is part of a government fiscal reform program aimed at reducing a ballooning deficit by finding new sources of revenue and cutting energy subsidies. We'll take a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue with the program. To stay with us.